With me today are two gentlemen from the organization Paralyzed Veterans of America. Second from my right is Mr. Robert Statham, who I believe is a National Service Officer with Paralyzed Veterans of America. And immediately to my right is Mr. Robert Arciola, who is a volunteer with Paralyzed Veterans of America. Okay? Could you tell us what are some of the more common conditions that you have amongst members of Paralyzed Veterans of America?
Yes, Joe, I would be glad to. First of all, when you think about Paralyzed Veterans of America, well, basically we're talking about those who, someone with a catastrophic type of injury. And these injuries stem from those with spinal cord injury and spinal cord disease. So the variation when we talk about that, when we talk about our veterans, it varies from different generations of veterans through different periods of our services and time in war and time in peacetime, non-service, service-connected veterans, I might say.
So many of them have what is in effect a spinal cord damage, but this leads to different forms of malfunction in different parts of the body?
That is so correct. That is so correct.
Could you give us a couple of concrete examples of that?
These veterans that we're talking about with this type of injury, let's say, for instance, those who have a paraplegic, and you have those who are quadriplegic. The injuries, and when we describe those, is someone who has lost the ability to ambulate due to some type of spinal cord injury or spinal cord disease for the lower extremities. The quadriplegic may be a person who has those same injuries or disabilities where it affects all the limbs, upper and lower extremities.
And are there also paralyzed veterans who suffer from some loss of one or more of the five senses? Paralyzed veterans with difficulties in seeing or hearing?
I believe that, yes, the residuals from any of the conditions can affect a number of different things when we talk about residuals from the condition, especially after long term, and the type of care that they receive for those conditions. Just as we are an aging population, it can interfere with those areas.
Speaking of the word aging, reminds me that we are now roughly some 40 years out from the end of the Vietnam War and already 20-some years out from the war in Kuwait. Does this mean that if we look at paralyzed veterans nationally, we would find only a small percentage of them stem from injuries in Vietnam and the great majority from more recent military conflicts, or isn't it that simple?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's really that simple, because as far as us as an organization and those that we represent, again, it may not, our representation may not be that of just because the veteran has an injury that stems from any of those conflicts, the fact that they are a veteran and they do have that type of injury. So to kind of get into the politics of that, I'd rather not, because I don't want to set any type of barriers in regards to that.
Regardless of the actual type of injury, okay, do you find in your work that the great majority of paralyzed veterans are fully aware of the benefits and services to which they are entitled, or are there sometimes little bits and pieces missing in their information set?
Yes, I really do agree with that, because of the fact that we often are here to help the veterans, to help them better understand what they're entitled to, the benefits. We offer a mirage of programs and services and things that veterans, just a lot of veterans just are unaware of, especially those with a catastrophic type of injury.
So providing information about the full range of benefits is very much part of the mission of PVA?
Correct. It definitely is.
Now, you work here in a local Chicago office of PVA. When you look at paralyzed veterans either in the city of Chicago or in northeastern Illinois, okay, do you find them to be concentrated largely in one particular type of paralysis, or do you see a wide variety of different types of paralytic injuries represented?
Well, definitely a wide variety. And as far as the demographics, we just cover a large region here in the Midwest.
And does that mean that any paralyzed veteran can find all the specialized services he or she needs at that hospital? Or is there some degree of specialization such that some VA hospitals focus more on one service than another?
Well, in regards to that, because of the system of care that we operate under, which is known as a hub and spoke type of system, I would say because of the Hines facility is definitely a major facility for that specialized type of care. And depending on the level of care, or once your care has reached a certain level, of course you can be followed up at some of the major out-based clinics and things of that nature. So they really try to make it convenient for the veteran as far as where they may live, the locations, and the ability to have access to these facilities.
Now, in addition to the fact that some veterans may not be fully aware of all services and entitlements, do you here and there have cases where a veteran says that he or she is not receiving all that to which they are entitled?
Well, that's exactly what we do as service officers. We actually try to make sure and advocate and ask the right questions just to make sure that the veteran is receiving all the benefits that they're entitled to, as well as the quality health care that they should be entitled to.
Does this mean that PVA is sometimes acting in the advocacy role of an ombudsman, helping the paralyzed veteran to obtain services which he or she may not have yet received?
We absolutely are.
And that is from the way you said that, that's a fairly frequent activity on the part of PVA?
That is a major activity for PVA.
Now, it's my understanding from you having so generously invited me to attend one of your meetings that you also have quite a few other activities of either a recreational or even an athletic nature, which I think would surprise many of our viewers for me to use the word athletic with regard to paralyzed veterans. Could you summarize for us what some of those major recreational activities are?
Sure. We find that sports and recreation are critical to the ongoing nature of ensuring our veterans live a long, inclusive life when it comes to sports and recreation activities. And some of the programs we do, our National Veterans Wheelchair Games, which we co-host with the VA, the Veterans Administration, is an event that's major across the country. We have about 600 athletes that come, exclusive to veterans who participate with varying disabilities, don't have to have paralysis. There are 19 different events that they participate in.
19 different events?
Yes, 19 different sporting events.
I'll ask you then to name only 3 or 4 of them if you could.
Probably the most popular ones, I'd say, are some of the shooting events. We have air guns, pistols, and shotgun for clay pigeons. We also have hand cycling, we have bowling, we have air guns, we have a host of field events and swimming events and track and field, of course.
And are these events held at an annual national convention, or do they take place at locations all across the country?
Well, they're centralized generally all across the country. They're held in different locations every year, and some places have been repeated before. We like to bring our events that we have with the VA across the country in a host of differing states so that the public sees what we're doing and what we can do, that life goes on despite your disability.
And at these particular games, do you sometimes have what we would call celebrity athletes coming in to visit, to say a few words to the vets?
Yes, actually one time I met Evander Holyfield at air gun competition. He actually picked up an air gun and he shot himself, and he did quite well.
I see.
Yes.
And in addition to these games, what are some of the other recreational or enjoyment activities that take place, at least here in northeastern Illinois?
You'll find we're starting in bocce ball event that is starting to grow very widespread across the country. We've already started last year lacrosse, wheelchair lacrosse. We've done that with Concordia University on a local level, and the lacrosse is open to not only local veterans, but also athletes that are non-veterans as well, able-bodied and non-able-bodied.
Okay, and in addition, I think I saw at your meeting some photos of fishing as well?
Yes, sir. We just finished about our 20th bass tournament that we hosted here in Illinois and Southern Illinois, and we had we had 27 boats in the water.
27 boats?
Correct. Yes, bass boats. You'd be quite impressed of the layout. It's just like the Bassmasters Classic that you might have seen on television, and the FLW tours where they weigh the bass in at the end of the day when they have their catch, and the highest winner obviously wins first to whatever place they finish in.
Well, it sounds like that's a very, very active recreational function, to say the least.
Yes.
And I thank you for the description. I thank you also, Robert S., for all the information you've provided. And I will be exploring more of PVA with yet another guest, but we will pause here for a moment, and I will say to our audience, don't go away, because there is much more to come about the world of paralyzed veterans.
Paralyzed Veterans of America serves hundreds and thousands of wounded veterans to ensure they have the proper health care, benefits, and services to carry them through the rest of their lives.
Thank you, Paralyzed Veterans.
Visit pva.org.
Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Voices of the Disabled, brought to you by Adaptive Chicago Productions. I'm Joel Margolis, your host, continuing in this episode to discuss the organization Paralyzed Veterans of America, the services they provide, and how they do it. Let me remind our viewers that on my far right is Mr. Robert Statham, who is a National Service Officer with Paralyzed Veterans of America. And to my immediate right, we are now joined by Mr. Winston Woodard, who I believe is titled a Senior Health Benefits Officer.
Specialist.
For Paralyzed Veterans of America.
Correct.
Winston, I was asking Robert, amongst other things, are there cases wherein veterans feel that they are not receiving the full range of health benefit or other services to which they are entitled? And he patiently explained to me that PVA staff often act as advocates or ombudsmen, in line with that, I'm also curious to know, do you feel that the reports that have sometimes been brought to us in the printed media or the electronic media about deficiencies in VA medical care to veterans, do you feel that those reports have been largely overblown, or is there some truth in them about deficiencies in medical care at some locations?
I would probably side on the side that I want to say that there are some facilities out there, because they are independently out there owned, but at the same time, I do think the media sometimes portrays a different view about VA care and the services that are there. But again, paralyzed veterans, we do have a medical service team that looks into those matters. We independently can go into VA medical facilities and provide an extensive report about recommendations that we do in turn send to the Undersecretary of VA Health, just to look at some trends and things that might be going on in VA.
Now, if a veteran, male or female, from any war, comes to you and says, I'm not getting the care to which I'm entitled, what would be a typical response on the part of PVA as a first step?
I mean, always as an advocate, we definitely want to assist any veteran at any time with any problems with benefits or questions about health care. We definitely want to be the leading advocates to try to resolve those issues for those veterans.
And do you usually do that through face-to-face meetings with VA staff or other techniques?
That is part of the package as well. We try to meet with our veterans individually, try to find out what they need. If that requires us to take a step forward and maybe advocate with the healthcare providers in the interest of claims or benefits, we would take that step as well.
Now, in addition to making sure that the VA provides all its services, do you also become involved in situations where veterans are receiving some form of health care or allied service from a private sector medical or social service organization and feel that they're not getting what they deserve?
Again, we represent veterans as far as our charter goes, is to represent veterans within VA, but in turn, we do reach out to non-VA facilities in efforts to secure medical evidence, to secure claims, again, to help those veterans.
Could you give me an example, using only the veteran's first name, of a vet who came to you and said, I'm not receiving the care to which I'm entitled, what can you do? And tell us how in that case you responded.
That occurs often. I meet veterans, and I guess I can call my veteran Joe. Joe actually had sought us earlier for benefits, but his condition actually worsened, and things had been changing for him in the community as far as his ADLs and just financially. But he sought our services out just to kind of review his benefits, talk to his medical providers, review some things, see what type of conditions had exacerbated, and we definitely took that information that we received from the medical providers, and we sought VA and got an increase in his benefits.
When you say that his condition worsened, am I to assume that he was a veteran of a military conflict of many, many years ago?
Yes, he was one of our Vietnam veterans, and again, we also have a group of veterans, again, not just injuries, but we deal with spinal cord injury and disease, so we have MS patients, ALS patients, and we definitely...
ALS patients as well?
Correct, and we serve those veterans. The law recently changed in the event for ALS that they're automatically service connected, so we definitely are making efforts to get those veterans' claims resolved.
Now, in addition to the story of Joe, you also had veterans from more recent military conflicts who have come to you and said that they're not getting what they deserve in terms of benefits. For instance, someone who has come back from Iraq.
Okay, yes, we've had OIF, IEF veterans. Recently, I'm working with a veteran named Max at this time. Again, Max, and he sustained some injuries while he was on active duty. So I'm working with him to secure benefits again for those type of injuries. I mean, these veterans suffer some catastrophic injuries, and their needs are great when they come home.
Now, when you speak about PVA serving as an advocate or an ombudsman, seeking to help the vet get his or her benefits from either the VA or a private sector agency, it makes it sound as if PVA is very much separate from the government. Am I to then conclude that PVA is totally a private sector organization?
Yes, we are a non-profit organization. We're congressionally chartered.
So you were chartered by the federal government?
Correct.
Now, go ahead, please.
But we are a non-profit organization for our donations and everything. It is strictly to our services and to our veterans.
Now, I heard you use the word donations. Am I to assume that even though you are federally chartered, okay, you are not receiving an annual funding from the federal government?
But not that I'm aware of. No, we are not. No.
So PVA needs to raise its own funds every year?
Correct, through donations from our members and generous donors out there.
Well, given the amount of service that PVA provides and the fact that you have offices in most major metropolitan areas of the country?
Correct.
Okay, that sounds like there's quite a bit of staff, okay, nationwide.
Correct. We have 34 service offices and about 77 national benefits offices across the country.
34 service offices and 77 national benefit offices.
That's correct.
That's quite a bit of staff indeed, okay? So does PVA have a fundraising division of its own?
We have a development and communications department as well at the national office.
Okay, and they seek funding from private individuals? Okay.
Donors, private individuals, members, and again, generous donors out there.
Do you ever get money from any one of the major foundations?
Not that I'm aware of. No, we do not.
Or not from the philanthropic organizations?
Not that I'm aware of.
Largely from private individuals then?
Correct, correct.
Okay, well that sounds like a very ambitious fundraising effort, okay? Along with this ambitious fundraising effort, okay, it sounds, based on what Robert S. has told me and what Robert A. told me, that PVA is engaged in quite a wide range of activities, okay? Correct. If you were to define in summary fashion the mission of PVA as PVA defines itself, how would you define that mission?
My definition, we definitely want to make sure that we are engaged with the community at large, but we definitely want to ensure that we're gathering benefits for our veterans. We're ensuring they're getting quality health care. We definitely want to sustain and get them out in the community to get into sporting events, get engaged into activities, and to re-enter the community.
Would it be fair to say, and I invite both of you to respond to this, that in addition to health care narrowly defined, that PVA is concerned with the overall quality of life of paralyzed veterans?
Correct.
That is so correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you sometimes get involved in housing issues for paralyzed vets?
We deal with housing. We definitely want to remove any barriers from the community. We have our national office is definitely engaged in barrier-free design. We've actually done a lot of projects here in Illinois and in the Chicagoland area to remove barriers to have veterans and peoples with disabilities to access this city.
So does that mean PVA is also helping vets to obtain education or training services from various places?
Yes, and we can do that through our paving for access for veterans, paving access for veterans employment. That's another program that we have within PVA, trying to get veterans employed and getting them back into the workforce.
Okay, so that's all part of the quality of life issue.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct. So we definitely want to take an approach of a holistic approach, trying to definitely ensure that we can get these veterans their health care, their benefits, access to care, access to their homes, access to community, and definitely get them engaged and employed.
I heard you use the phrase access to community. Does this mean that PVA is also concerned that paralyzed vets be integrated into the life of the neighborhood or town where they live? Are you trying to help vets become involved in local community organizations and the like?
Yes, that is a main goal. We want them to have that quality of life and just continue living. Our services, again, are free of charge, and we're partners for life.
And if a paralyzed vet very strongly wants to find some kind of employment, does PVA provide an employment counseling service as well?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Oh, in addition to everything else, you're
Yes,
doing
we do.
that.
Yes, we do.
You're
Yes.
doing that as well.
Yes, we do.
Our Voc Rehab program covers that, and matter of fact, we have 7 locations across the U.S. now for Voc Rehab, and their major focus is to assist the veteran with opportunities of going back to school if they wish to seek employment, learning new skills, and they focused on even helping the family as well.
So you have a Voc Rehab section unto itself.
Correct.
And in that, are you involved in things such as helping paralyzed vets to identify occupational opportunities of which they might not have been aware?
Oh, definitely. That's even part of under the veterans care, the acute rehab section is part of his rehabilitation process, and they will follow the veteran, throughout his lifetime just to seek opportunities such as that, and any goals and any ways of assisting them.
And then and also to say that our Voc Rehab counselor, he's tailored enough to actually go out and work with that veteran and find out what his disabilities or what his condition is, and actually meet with the employer to ensure
Correct.
they get a nice connection between the veteran and the employer for the veteran.
So people from your Voc Rehab section will actually go to an employer and meet face-to-face with an employer to try and smooth the relationship?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so the Voc Rehab division then is involved in a variety of stages of the identification, the seeking, and the placement, and the adaptation to employment?
Correct.
All the way along?
Correct.
Sounds like an impressive range of services, to say the least. And it sounds like the PVA staff, such as you two gentlemen, stay very, very busy indeed.
Yes, definitely.
If you were to say an estimate, what would you guess is the total number of paralyzed veterans nationwide?
Well, nationwide today, we have thousands of veterans with some type of spinal cord injury or spinal cord disease. Right now, for my region, my section alone, I operate with about 2,000 clients just out of my office. Now, that's just those who are receiving benefits, but the membership itself is much higher.
And much higher than
nationwide,
that.
yes. Now, we've have obtained just within this year as a organization, we've attained over 10 million in benefits for these veterans.
10 million
Yes,
in
that's
benefits?
just in this organization right here in this region. And
Just
not-
in this region?
Right, and not counting, the number of other numerous programs and things that not only help the veteran, but help the family as well.
Well, I think on hearing the phrase 10 million, even I, a man accused of having a glib tongue, am left momentarily speechless. So I think we will have to draw a line here for the moment. And I want to thank both of you, Robert Statham, okay, and Winston Woodard,
All right, thank
for
you.
taking the time to come in and talk with us about this remarkable organization. And I am sure that all the staff of Adaptive Chicago Productions, along with myself, wish you all the good luck in the world in continuing your admirable mission.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
perhaps you'll
Thank
come
you.
back and visit with us again
We would love
some
to.
other
Sure will.
time.
Love to.
Hello, my name is Maria Hernandez. I am the Executive Director for the Vaughan Chapter Paralyzed Veterans of America. We are located in Westchester, Illinois. The address is 2235 Enterprise Drive, suite number 3501, Westchester, Illinois, 60154. Our toll-free number is 1-800-727-2234 or 708-947-9790. Our website address is www.vaughanpva.org. That is www.vaughanpva.org. We are here Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. We are here for any questions, any concerns. Please give us a call, and we will be more than happy to help you. Thank you.